What if the pain you keep carrying isn't actually coming from people, situations, or the past, but from your inability to emotionally let go? Not because you're weak, but because nobody ever taught you how. Stay with me until the end, because the final lessons will completely change the way you see attachment, relationships, and your own inner power. Today, I want to share 7 life lessons about emotional detachment, not as a way to stop loving people, but as a way to finally stop losing yourself. Your peace cannot depend on someone else's behavior. That is a sentence that sounds simple when you first hear it, but if you truly sit with it, you begin to realize how deeply it challenges the way most of us live our lives. From the time we are young, we are conditioned to measure our emotional state based on how others respond to us. If someone praises us, we feel worthy. If someone ignores us, we feel invisible. If someone chooses us, we feel valuable. If someone walks away, we suddenly question our entire identity. Without realizing it, we slowly hand over the control of our emotional world to people who were never meant to carry that responsibility. And the most dangerous part is that we rarely notice when this happens. It creeps in quietly. One day you're simply caring about someone, and the next day your entire mood depends on whether they text back, whether they acknowledge your effort, whether they understand your intentions. Your peace becomes fragile because it is no longer anchored within you. It is floating in someone else's hands. Think about how many times your entire day has shifted because of someone else's behavior. Maybe someone you care about spoke to you in a harsh tone. Maybe a message you expected never arrived. Maybe someone didn't appreciate something you worked hard on. Suddenly, your mind starts spinning stories. You begin replaying conversations, searching for hidden meanings, wondering what you did wrong. Hours pass, sometimes days. And all of that emotional energy is being spent trying to interpret someone else's actions. The truth is, most people are simply living their own lives, dealing with their own struggles, fears, distractions, and responsibilities. They are not always aware of the emotional weight we attach to their behavior. Yet we give their words and actions enormous power over how we feel about ourselves. We allow their inconsistency to create storms inside us. And when your emotional stability depends on something so unpredictable, peace becomes almost impossible to maintain. The real shift begins the moment you recognize this pattern within yourself. Awareness is always the first step toward freedom. When you start observing your emotional reactions honestly, you may notice how quickly your peace rises and falls depending on what someone else does. A compliment lifts you, silence unsettles you, approval excites you, rejection wounds you. It becomes clear that the external world is constantly pulling your emotional strings. But here is the deeper truth. Emotional maturity begins when you stop expecting others to regulate your inner world. People will have good days and bad days. They will misunderstand you. They will disappoint you sometimes. They will behave in ways that reflect their own emotional state rather than your worth. When you internalize this understanding, you stop interpreting every behavior as a reflection of your value. Instead, you begin to see it as a reflection of their journey, their mindset, and their circumstances. There is a quiet strength that develops when you stop reacting to every shift in someone else's mood or attention. It does not mean you become cold or indifferent. In fact, it means you become more emotionally intelligent. You still care. You still listen. You still show kindness and love. But you are no longer emotionally shaken by every change in the environment around you. Your stability begins to come from something deeper. Your values, your self-respect, and your understanding of life. When someone appreciates you, you feel grateful but not dependent. When someone misunderstands you, you respond with clarity instead of insecurity. When someone leaves your life, you allow yourself to feel the sadness, but you do not let it destroy your sense of self. Your center remains intact because you have stopped outsourcing your emotional stability. This shift requires courage because it forces you to take responsibility for your own emotional well-being. It is much easier to blame others for how we feel. It is easier to say, "They made me upset," or "They ruined my day." But when you take full ownership of your emotional world, you realize something powerful. No one can truly control your peace unless you allow them to. Their actions may trigger emotions, but the way those emotions grow, settle, or transform within you is ultimately shaped by your awareness. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. You breathe. You ask yourself whether this situation truly deserves the level of emotional energy you are giving it. Sometimes the most empowering response is simply choosing not to carry what someone else has dropped on your shoulders. Not every comment requires a defense. Not every misunderstanding requires a long explanation. Not every absence requires a painful story in your mind. Over time, when you practice this kind of emotional independence, something remarkable begins to happen. Life starts to feel lighter. The constant emotional turbulence begins to fade. You still experience joy, disappointment, excitement, and sadness, because those are natural parts of being human, but they no longer control your entire sense of peace. Your happiness is no longer a fragile glass that can shatter with someone else's words. Instead, it becomes a quiet inner foundation that remains steady even when circumstances change. Relationships also begin to transform in a healthy way. When your peace does not depend on someone's behavior, you interact with them from a place of genuine connection rather than emotional neediness. You appreciate people for who they are instead of demanding that they constantly validate your existence. And paradoxically, this kind of emotional stability often attracts deeper, more respectful relationships because people can feel the calm strength within you. There is also a spiritual dimension to this realization. When you stop tying your peace to other people's actions, you reconnect with something deeper within yourself. You begin to understand that your emotional state is not meant to be a constant reaction to the external world. It is meant to be guided by awareness, gratitude, and intention. You realize that peace is not something someone gives you. It is something you cultivate inside yourself through daily choices. You choose how long you hold on to a hurtful moment. You choose whether you replay a painful memory or release it. You choose whether you allow someone's temporary behavior to define your long-term emotional state. Each of these choices slowly shapes the quality of your life. The more you practice this awareness, the more resilient you become. And resilience is the quiet superpower that allows you to move through life with grace, even when things don't go the way you expected. When you reach this stage of understanding, emotional detachment stops feeling like distance and starts feeling like freedom. You are no longer chasing constant reassurance. You are no longer trying to decode every silence or explain every misunderstanding. You are simply living your life with clarity. You give your love generously, but you do not beg for it in return. You respect others, but you respect yourself enough to maintain your peace. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this journey is that it allows you to experience relationships more authentically. Instead of clinging to people out of fear, you connect with them out of choice. You appreciate their presence, but you do not collapse when they are absent. Your emotional world becomes rooted within you, steady and grounded, rather than floating in the unpredictable behaviors of others. And when your peace finally comes from within, instead of from other people's actions, you discover a truth that changes everything. The moment you stop giving others control over your emotional world is the moment you reclaim the deepest power of your life. The power to remain calm, centered, and whole no matter what the world around you chooses to do. Not everything deserves your emotional energy. This truth is simple, yet incredibly difficult for most people to practice. In a world where we are constantly connected, constantly informed, and constantly reacting, it becomes very easy to give pieces of our emotional energy to everything around us. A comment online, a stranger's opinion, a minor misunderstanding, a moment of criticism, suddenly our mind is consumed. We replay conversations, imagine arguments, and create stories about situations that may not even matter tomorrow. The problem is not that we care. Caring is part of being human. The problem is that we often give the same level of emotional attention to things that are temporary, insignificant, or completely outside our control. And when you spread your emotional energy too thin across everything, you slowly exhaust yourself without even realizing why. Think about how often your mind becomes occupied with things that have very little impact on your life's bigger picture. Someone says something slightly rude, and suddenly you spend hours thinking about what you should have said back. A person ignores your message, and your thoughts begin building explanations, assumptions, and doubts. A small inconvenience during the day turns into frustration that follows you into the evening. These moments may seem small individually, but together they drain your mental and emotional strength. Your mind becomes a place of constant reaction instead of conscious focus. What most people do not realize is that emotional energy works just like physical energy. If you use it carelessly throughout the day, by nightfall you feel mentally tired, overwhelmed, and emotionally scattered. You may not even remember what caused the exhaustion, only that something inside you feels heavy. Emotional discipline begins the moment you recognize that your energy is a limited and valuable resource. Just like you would not give away your time to every distraction. You cannot afford to give your emotional attention to every situation that appears in front of you. Some things deserve your focus, your goals, your growth, your relationships that bring genuine support and love into your life. But many other things simply do not deserve that space inside your mind. The challenge is learning to pause before reacting. When something happens that triggers you, ask yourself one honest question. Will this still matter in a week? In a month? In a year? Most of the time, the answer is no. Yet we treat these passing moments as if they define our entire day, sometimes even our entire self-worth. This awareness changes the way you move through life. Instead of immediately reacting, you begin observing situations with a little more distance and clarity. Someone's negative opinion no longer shakes your confidence the way it once did. A small conflict does not consume your thoughts for the rest of the day. You begin to understand that people often speak from their own emotions, their own stress, their own insecurities. Their words are not always a reflection of your value. When you see life from this perspective, you stop carrying unnecessary emotional weight. You no longer feel the need to respond to every criticism, defend every misunderstanding, or explain yourself to everyone who questions you. There is a quiet maturity in recognizing that sometimes the strongest response is simply choosing not to engage. When you become selective about where your emotional energy goes, something powerful begins to happen inside you. Your mind becomes calmer, your focus becomes clearer. The small storms that once disrupted your day begin to lose their power. Instead of reacting to everything, you start directing your energy toward things that truly matter. Your personal growth, meaningful relationships, creative pursuits, and the goals that shape your future. This shift also changes how others perceive you. When people notice that you are not easily pulled into unnecessary drama or arguments, they begin to treat your presence with more respect. Your calmness becomes a kind of quiet strength, because you are no longer someone who can be emotionally manipulated by every passing moment. Over time, this practice transforms not only your emotional health, but also the overall quality of your life. You begin to feel lighter, more focused, and more in control of your inner world. Situations that once triggered hours of overthinking now pass through your mind like clouds in the sky. You still care about people, and you still stand up for what matters, but you no longer allow trivial events to disturb your inner balance. Life becomes less about reacting to everything around you and more about consciously choosing what deserves your attention. That choice, simple as it may seem, becomes one of the most powerful habits you can develop. And when you finally learn that your emotional energy is precious and limited, you begin protecting it with wisdom. Because the moment you stop giving your energy to everything is the moment you start giving your best energy to the life you truly want to build. You cannot control people, only your response. This realization is one of the most liberating truths you will ever understand, yet it is also one of the hardest to accept. From a very young age, we develop the habit of trying to influence how others behave toward us. We try to explain ourselves better, love harder, give more, sacrifice more, hoping that if we do enough, people will treat us the way we want to be treated. We believe that if we say the right words, act the right way, or prove our worth long enough, we can shape someone else's behavior. But life has a quiet way of teaching us that human beings are unpredictable. People have their own emotions, their own wounds, their own fears, and their own perspectives. And no matter how much effort you put in, you cannot fully control how another person chooses to act. This truth often becomes clear during moments of disappointment. You may show kindness to someone and receive indifference in return. You may offer loyalty to someone who eventually walks away. You may explain your intentions clearly, yet still be misunderstood. In those moments, it is natural to feel frustrated or hurt, because your mind begins asking questions that have no easy answers. Why did they behave this way? What did I do wrong? Could I have prevented this outcome somehow? The mind searches for control because it believes control would have protected us from the pain. But the deeper reality is that other people's choices belong to them. Their behavior is shaped by their experiences, their values, and sometimes even their struggles that you may never fully see. Trying to control or change someone who is not ready to change is like trying to stop the wind with your hands. Exhausting and ultimately impossible. The moment you stop trying to control people, you create space for a much more powerful focus, mastering your own response. Your response is where your real strength lies. While you cannot control what someone says, you can control how much meaning you attach to it. While you cannot control someone's decision to leave, you can control how you move forward afterward. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin choosing your reactions with awareness. This shift may sound subtle, but it changes everything. When someone disrespects you, your instinct might once have been to argue endlessly or prove them wrong. But emotional maturity allows you to pause and ask yourself whether engaging will actually improve the situation. Sometimes your most powerful response is simply stepping away from what no longer aligns with your peace. When you focus on your response, rather than someone else's behavior, you regain control over your emotional world. Situations that once triggered anger, frustration, or sadness begin to lose their intensity. This does not mean you become emotionless or passive. It means you become intentional. Instead of letting someone else's actions dictate your mood, you begin responding in ways that protect your dignity and your peace. If someone treats you unfairly, you may calmly set a boundary rather than absorbing the negativity. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, you may choose distance instead of confrontation. These decisions are not acts of weakness, they are acts of self-respect. They show that you value your emotional well-being enough to step out of situations that drain your energy. There is also a quiet confidence that grows when you truly understand this principle. You stop feeling the need to win every argument or convince everyone of your perspective. You realize that not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected, and not every opinion needs to be challenged. Sometimes, people will see you through the lens of their own assumptions, and no amount of explanation will change that. When you accept this, you free yourself from the endless cycle of trying to manage how others perceive you. Instead, you focus on living in alignment with your own values. your energy shifts from controlling others to strengthening yourself, your character, your patience, your resilience. Over time, this way of thinking transforms how you navigate relationships and challenges. Instead of feeling powerless when someone behaves unexpectedly, you begin to feel grounded because you know that your response is always within your control. Life will still present difficult people, unfair situations, and moments of misunderstanding. But those moments no longer have the ability to shake your inner stability the way they once did. You understand that your power does not come from controlling the world around you. It comes from choosing how you meet that world with clarity, strength, and calm awareness. And when you truly embrace the truth that you cannot control people, but you can always control your response, you step into a deeper kind of power, the power of emotional mastery, where your peace is no longer dictated by the chaos around you, but guided by the wisdom within you.